My name's Gary Zuckett. I'm Executive Director of West Virginia Citizen Action, and we've assembled some leaders from the faith and the civic community today to make a statement about the upcoming vote in the U.S. House of Representatives on cutting food stamp program. We feel that this is a really wrong-headed way to go, and our speakers will elaborate on that. And our first speaker is our hostess today is Ellen Allen, who's director of the Covenant House.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you all for being here. It's always a pleasure to have the community in Covenant House. And if you get a chance, I hope you'll peek in our drop-in center. That's really the pulse of what's happening in the community around us. We'll have as many as 170, actually we're averaging 172 people walking through our doors every day. They're coming for food. We were serving 32 families a day in our food pantry alone. We'll also come for vouchers to have their hair cut, to get clothes. We'll have maybe 30 showers taken today, 24 loads of laundry. People will come in for water. We depend on community support, and SNAP is a significant piece of assistance that helps the people with whom we work. It appears about $29 a month less will come to West Virginia families due to this cut. $29 a month is significant when you're talking on a food budget. With 32 families coming, they take away about 20 items every time they visit our food pantry. Okay? And they can come twice a month. And that's something we recently implemented only about 6 months ago because we saw such a great need. Our shelves were depleted only about a month ago, and the communities responded, food's coming in, but even with this tremendous response from everyone around us, we still do not have enough to meet the needs of people coming. So we think it's significant for the SNAPs to stay in place, and take some time to look around while you're here to see the heartbeat of Covenant House, the heartbeat of the community, and see how people are needing our support.
Thank you, Ellen. They're doing a tremendous job here, but their job would be even that much harder to fill the needs if the SNAP program, the $40 billion in cuts nationwide are instituted. And our next speaker is Sean O'Leary from the West Virginia Center on Budget and Policy to give us the numbers on how this would affect West Virginia and actually who is receiving the food stamps in West Virginia.
Yeah, first I just want to talk a little bit about SNAP in West Virginia, and then I'll talk about exactly who this proposed bill in the House of Representatives is going after, and who is getting their SNAP benefits taken away. And it's really disturbing who they're going after. But first, about 1 in 5 people in West Virginia receive a SNAP benefit, and of those, that's about 350,000 people, of those 40% are children. So SNAP is a program that puts food in the mouths of children, overwhelmingly. SNAP is also one of our most effective anti-poverty programs that we currently use in this country. Just the census data last week, or yesterday, was released, and it showed that last year 4 million people were lifted out of poverty because of SNAP. SNAP benefits allowed them enough income for themselves that they were no longer living in poverty, let alone the millions of people who had more income but still were living in poverty because of the SNAP program. It's an effective not only at lifting people out of poverty, but boosting the economy. SNAP benefits are spent immediately, and they generate economic activity. Moody's Analytics says $1 in SNAP benefits generates $1.70 in economic activity. Last year alone, $500 million of economic activity was pumped into West Virginia through the SNAP program. So SNAP is important to families, to children, and to the state's economy, in a state that has 20% of its population receiving SNAP benefits. So what's happening with SNAP? The bill in the House wants to cut SNAP by $40 billion over the next 10 years, but it cuts it by really severely restricting who is eligible for SNAP. There are certain waivers that states are allowed to do that in times of high unemployment or in areas of high unemployment, like in West Virginia where we have 7.5% unemployment. We've been way above average unemployment for the past 5 years. It allows them to receive SNAP even if they are unemployed, and keep their benefits even if they don't have a child, and those do have children. This program would eliminate SNAP coverage for those people who are searching for work but unable to find it. Right now in West Virginia, we have 3 job openings for every one, I always say that backwards. We have 3 unemployed workers for every job opening. So if you restrict SNAP to people who can't find jobs, you're kicking millions of people off of SNAP just because they live in an area with high unemployment and are having difficulty finding a job. Another thing that states can do with the SNAP program is that they can allow families to deduct the cost of childcare, the cost of housing from their income when they're determining the SNAP eligibility. And that allows more families who maybe their incomes are slightly above the poverty line, the poverty threshold of the SNAP eligibility rate, but once you factor in they're working, so they've got high childcare costs, they've got multiple children, so their housing costs are high, they're right back below poverty. SNAP allows them to deduct those costs and then allow that to then meet the eligibility requirements for SNAP. This bill takes that away, kicking these families, working families with children who's being targeted by this provision of SNAP. Not only that, these working families with children, their children qualify for free lunch. Their free lunch is based on the fact that they receive SNAP. Once they get kicked off of SNAP, they lose their free lunch. So it's a double whammy for those kids. They don't get their food stamps, their parents don't get their food stamps, they don't get their free lunch at school anymore. In a state like West Virginia, where we have the Feed and Achieve Act that we've worked really hard and we're really proud of, that's based on eligibility for free lunch programs, is the underpinning of that program. This type of reducing the eligibility for SNAP would significantly undermine programs like Feed and Achieve in the state. And finally, it eliminates SNAP programs for unemployed, like I said, for those who are unemployed who can't find jobs, and those who are unemployed who can't find jobs even if they have children. So all told, if this bill comes to pass, that kicks 4 million people off of SNAP next year, and then 3 million a year for the next 10 years. If you take the base numbers and apply that West Virginia, that's about 28,000 people will lose SNAP benefits next year in West Virginia, and then 20,000 a year for the next 10 years. We're talking about 40% of those being children. So, there you go. Thousands of children kicked off of SNAP, plus losing their free lunches, plus their parents are losing their SNAP benefits, plus they're being punished because they live in an area of high unemployment. They're being punished because they're being punished because they're working and they have their child care costs. So this is really a mean-spirited, targeted attack at people benefiting from SNAP. And these are people who don't deserve this kind of treatment.
Well, thank you very much, Sean. From what I understand, in the House, they sort of split the agricultural bill. They've already passed the portion that gives all of the big tax breaks and subsidies to the big agricultural corporations, and they've split off the SNAP, and now they're getting ready to make cuts in the SNAP. And our next speaker is Sam Hickman, the CEO of National Association of Social Workers, West Virginia chapter. Sam?
Thanks so much, Gary. In the movie The Hunger Games, the contestants fought side by side with other contestants that they befriended. Many of those contestants lost their lives in the course of those games. And that is instructive to us because people will lose their lives and lives will be wasted because of this action, if this action by our U.S. Congress goes forward. So in that spirit, I'd like us all to observe a moment of silence for the people who would be drastically, negatively affected by this piece of legislation. Thank you. What I want to talk about is the effect on children of being food insecure. 1 in 5 children in the United States was food insecure in 2012. This was the piece of information that really informed the West Virginia Senate's Select Committee on Children in Poverty in order to put forward the Feed to Achieve Act in West Virginia. Child food insecurity is more pervasive in rural areas. This is a fact. We know this. West Virginia is one of the most rural states in the nation. In 2009, the United States Department of Agriculture found that SNAP benefits, and that is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program reduced the depth of child poverty by almost 21% and the severity of child poverty by almost 28%. Children with poor nutrition, food insecurity, and unhealthy diets underperform in school. Not surprising. They are at risk for learning problems and developmental delays, and they exhibit more behavioral problems in school. A study that came out of Oregon found that just providing breakfast to school children reduced the number of behavioral incidents in the school by 30%. As part of our recent economic stimulus package, SNAP benefits were given a little bit of a boost. But that law will expire later this year, so families who receive SNAP benefits will already see their benefits reduced by $36 a month. And that is not a small amount for many of our families and children. The point is that any short-term savings that we may get from this bill will far outweigh the long-term negative effects and health of our nation's children. We know that investing $1 in a child's education multiplies itself by 7 times as those children grow up healthy and take their productive places in our society. This is a wrong-headed idea that will take us and our nation's children in the wrong direction. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sam. And I'd like to follow up with a few statistics of my own on that. We're talking about, cutting food to children, talking about, playing games with hunger in America, when at the same time we're letting large corporations in this country really off the hook as far as paying their fair share. We've already cut over $1 trillion from programs that serve and protect working Americans, but the corporations in the country have not really felt the pain at all. Big corporations like General Electric, Wells Fargo, and Verizon, they've gone years without paying any federal income taxes because of all the loopholes that exist in our tax system. Cutting SNAP right now in in America would cost 55,000 jobs in the first year alone. So this is a giant step backwards as far as getting our economy back on track. If we're trying to balance the budget, it's not the way to do it, to balance it by taking food away from kids and hungry families. There's one tax loophole right now that would pay for the whole $40 billion in the SNAP cuts, and that is the one on corporate CEO compensation. Right now, corporations are limited to deducting only the first $1 million that they pay their CEOs off of their income taxes. So they've sort of gotten around that. They've skirted that limitation by paying their CEOs in stock options, which are not under that limit. So they get to deduct billions and billions of dollars in CEO compensation from the corporate income tax. $50 billion over 10 years would be the price tag if we eliminated that one corporate tax loophole. Would totally pay for the food stamp cuts. And our last speaker is representing the West Virginia Council of Churches. It's Father Brian Donnell. He'll give us some faith perspective. Thank you, Father.
Well, the faith perspective on this is quite simple. The denominations that form the Council of Churches, of course, look toward the Scriptures. And what do they find? Jewish Scriptures. Isaiah 58, share your bread with the hungry, take care of the poor and the afflicted. The Christian Gospels. Jesus in Matthew 25 actually identifies himself with the hungry. What you do for the least of these, you do for me. But I must say this, you don't have to turn to the compassion of God or the love of Christ or even niceness to condemn this law that's before the House. Common sense, as you just heard, would say this is a terribly wrong way to go. How the blazes can you go set up a law in Congress that's going to subvert our feet to achieve that? But if you want the faith perspective, if you take Scripture seriously, if this law passes, God will not be amused.
Well, thank you. That concludes the prepared statements from our speakers this morning. We are open for questions now, any of the speakers. And if there aren't any direct questions, we'll be open for one-on-one interviews as we break up. And I thank you all for coming. And also, I wanted to recognize Rochelle from Senator Rockefeller's office is with us today. Forgive me for we also have a representative from the State Employees Union here with us also. And thank you all. Any questions? Yeah.
So what would Jesus do?
He would take care of the poor first. The judgment on a culture, many wise heads and hearts have decided, resides upon what do you do for those on the margin. And as I said, Scripture is just full of examples of God not being impressed with beautiful temples or sacrifices in temples or parades or so. Oh, this is all nice. He constantly asks throughout the Jewish and Christian scriptures, what are you doing for those on the margins? But it's not just Christians who make that judgment point about what you do for those who are poor and hurting really tells you what sort of civilization you have.
And I've said it before and I'll say it again. A budget is a moral document. It shows what we as a country value in where we put our funding. You know, cutting funding for hungry families while at the same time allowing these egregious tax loopholes to go unattended is not the way to balance the budget.
They've separated out what I think of as food stamps, but SNAP nowadays, from the Farm Bill. There was much verbiage on both left and right on fixing entitlements to people who probably shouldn't get them in the Farm Bill. Wealthy farmers, who mentioned corporations and so forth. I personally am unaware of any great reform that happened in the Farm Bill on that. What I am hearing about is the separated out to a separate bill, the SNAP, dealing with SNAP, while you just heard what's proposed for that. It's just simply outrageous.
Any further questions? If not, again, I thank you, and our speakers will make themselves available after the conference for individual interviews. Thanks everybody for coming. Oh, and thanks to our city council member for being here also.